In the House, it is the Senator from District 29, David Blount. Good morning, David. How are you, sir? It's good to have you.
Good to be with you, Paul. Happy New Year.
Happy New Year to you, and I hope everybody, I hope you had a good one, and the start of the session is as you expected.
Yeah, it starts fast. We've got a deadline this week. Bills have to be filed a week from next Monday, so we're moving fast.
And before, there are a lot of changes forthcoming over in the Senate, over in the House. Not so much in the Senate, other than some people are, making the decision whether they're going to qualify or not. We've had several people. Anybody in the last 24 hours has made a decision not to return that you know of?
In the last 24 hours, not that I'm aware of. But I should say before we get started, Paul, I have qualified and I am running for re-election. So I'm asking the voters of Senate District 29 to send me back. So.
That was my. As a matter of fact, your district's changed a little bit, hasn't it? With the new map out?
Every district has changed. Mine has changed a little bit. Everybody up there's district has changed a little bit. Most of my district is the same, but still entirely within Hinds County. But we'll be running lose a little bit, gain a little bit. But that's the way it is after redistricting.
Your BVAP change, or it is about the same?
About the same. About a 50-50
about the
district.
Same. There's so many things that we need to talk about. First of all, just the main things that you think will be handled this year that from your committee, and your committee is on gaming, and I'm not sure what's happening on gaming, other than will we or will we not take up this mobile betting this year?
I don't think that we are in a different place this year than we were last year. The industry here in the state, who employ tens of thousands of people, still trying to get on one page, and we're encouraging them to do that. We want to try to move with the industry all united on how to go forward. And right now we're not there. If we get there, I'm happy to consider it, but right now we're not there.
So what you're saying is the input you've gotten from the casinos is that they're just not ready for mobile betting in the state, by and large.
Some of them are and some of them aren't. And so and then there's differences on how that might work, what it might look like. So we're trying to get everybody on the same page, and we're not there yet, but I think we'll get there, if not this year, soon.
Will there be some bills out there that would just have to die in committee, or you're saying that there are no bills that are going to be entertaining this?
I can't speak for any bills that have been filed because, as of yesterday at least, there were no bills that had been referred to the gaming committee. If there are bills on the mobile issue, it's still my belief that we need to get the industry on the same page before we proceed.
Let's talk about some of the other issues in the state. First of all, the income tax and what's going to happen to that. There are two different trains of thought from the Senate and the House. So your thoughts on this?
This is not the time to be cutting taxes. Last year we passed the largest tax cut in the history of the state. The income tax is 1/3 of the state budget. It's a little bit more than $2.2 billion a year. And I would ask your listeners two questions. I would say, do you believe that this economy the last couple of years has been propped up with unprecedented federal spending that won't continue? And secondly, do you believe that we could see a recession in the next 2 or 3 years? And if the answer to those questions is yes, and I think everybody listening to this program would say the answer to those questions is yes, this is not the time to make radical changes to the basic funding of state government. We need to spend this one-time money on one-time expenses, and that's what we did a lot of that last year in a bipartisan way, and that was good. But the income tax is 1/3 of the state budget, and the economy is going to go down. The federal spending is going to be greatly reduced, and where are we going to be? We don't need to raise taxes. The only thing we need to raise taxes on, in my opinion, are vaping cigarettes. But other than that, we don't need to raise taxes. And we don't need to cut taxes. We just need to be cautious and conservative with our money. So I think we just need to leave it alone and spend one-time money on one-time expenses and do what we've been doing.
So you're basically saying with the surplus, and by the way, the surplus is, from what I gather, you're saying all of the surplus is built on, or at least a majority of the surplus is built on one-time money.
A lot of it is, yes.
Well, how much is a lot, though? I mean, because, and it's been recurring for the last several years in times that we did not have the impact of one time, not as much in some cases. Well,
last year, of course, one of the big issues facing the legislature was what to do with the American Rescue Plan money. That was $1.8 billion that was passed by the Democrats in Washington, and we spent $1.5 million, $300 million left. And that money, I think we had a good bipartisan plan on that. And we spent all that money on one-time expenses. There's still, as I said, $300 million left. We're going to have to figure that out this session. But a lot of the spending by Mississippians, by Mississippi businesses, and by just individual Mississippians the last couple of years has been propped up by federal spending, by people getting mailed checks. And that's not going to continue. Governor Blount twice in his second term had to cut budgets because revenue wasn't coming in. Governor Barber twice had to cut budgets because revenue wasn't coming in. Governor Musgrove had to cut budgets because revenue. And we're going to be back in the real world pretty soon. And the federal spending that we've seen the last 4 years is not going to continue. And we are going to have a recession at some point in the near future, and we don't need to make permanent changes to our tax structure.
So you're saying that we had a surplus, and I think the surplus now is in the billions.
Yes,
and
that's
instead
right.
of returning that to the people of the state in rebates, or maybe even, as I alluded to yesterday, the possibility of cutting the grocery taxes if you can get the municipalities straightened out on this one. Instead of getting a cut to grocery taxes, or instead of giving people rebates, you would rather spend that money on government services or just not spend it at all?
I would spend it the way we spent it last year, which is we still have water and sewer problems all across this state. I talked to a senator from the Gulf Coast yesterday that heard from his district, Republican senator from the Gulf Coast yesterday, about how there's sewer problems in his community and their water problems. They had to boil water.
Well, have they filed for some of the money that's coming down from the feds? There are
yes.
$600 million going to just the city of Jackson.
Yes, they have, and they have more needs. That what they got last year, what they got from the federal government last year, and a good plan that we passed last year that gives them some money, that's going to help, and that was very important. But we still have those needs out there. We still have water and sewer needs across the state. We still have road needs. We've still got infrastructure needs all across the state that we're not satisfied.
By the way, how's your faucets running?
I have not lost water. I live in Jackson, and I did not lose water. I had some moments of reduced pressure, a couple of days of reduced pressure. But I do represent areas in Jackson where folks didn't have running water for more than a week. So it's a problem.
Would you spend some of that money on prisons or for the mental health situation, or, again, they would also not be in your checklist to spend some money on?
I agree with what my conservative Republican friends always say, is you spend one-time money on one-time expenses. And I would also say the flip side of that is you do not reduce recurring revenue because of a one-time influx of revenue. And that's what happened with a lot of this federal money. I mean, we've gotten billions of federal money. The Medicaid match is about to change, which is going to require more state money. This is one-time revenue to the state, and so you don't reduce an ongoing annual source of revenue, what the income tax is, just because you had a one-time windfall. You need to be.
How long would you hold on? If you said 4 years, if another 4 years your stance would be the same way, or is another year or 2 years? How long are we talking about when you see these surpluses, regardless of how they manifest themselves, federal and or state, one more than the other? Would a David Blount said, "No, let's wait another 5 years, another 4 years, 3 years, 2 years"?
Well, I think we're going to
before giving some of the money back to the people.
We're going to give it back to them and meeting the needs out there that have been ignored for a long, long time that they need fixed, like roads, water, sewer, hospitals. That's
realize we have never been in a better financial state with almost $4 billion in surplus. Our state is in good shape. We had over $500 million in tax cuts that have been from the legislative session last year, but we are $4 billion in surplus. And what you say is just hold on to it because it's going to get worse. And with 2 more years of Biden, I tend to agree with you in that facet. More with David Blount coming up next. We'll be live, a little Milton music here, live from the Trustmark Studios. State Senator David Blount with me, reminding you where the cutting-edge technology is connectivity at your fingertips, anytime, any place for your bank. Trustmark, people you trust, advice that works. Member FDIC. I'm not sure if the Senate is part of this. I know the House is. has this plan that they're going to produce for the hospitals, a health care plan. Are you aware of that, or is that in participation with the Senate?
I'm not aware of that.
Democrats in the House.
The Democratic plan is to expand Medicaid. The Democratic plan is to spend $1 to get $9 and do the most important thing for our hospitals. That's the Democratic plan. If there's a Republican plan, I don't know what it is. All right, if the Republican plan is we've got 40 hospitals at risk of closure, but we're going to send you a check for $500, if that's their plan for health care in the state, I'd like to hear it. But the Democratic plan is to expand Medicaid like 39 other states have done.
You're beginning to sound a little bit like Andy or Mr. Schiff here when you say $500. Are you being facetious about that, or
no?
Was that actual? Send the hospitals a total of $500?
The Senate plan for tax rebates is to send taxpayers checks of up to $500.
That's not what you said. You said the Republicans wanted to send the hospitals $500.
No, I said that they want to send people $500. So and I don't think that's a good idea. I think the cost of that plan could easily pay for the Medicaid match to draw down $900 million every single year. And that's a better thing we should do with our money. So that's the Democratic plan, which is to expand Medicaid. I don't know what the Republican plan is for the hospitals.
Is that leadership's plan also for this session to try to push a Medicaid expansion as far as the lieutenant governor is concerned?
I can't speak for the lieutenant governor. I'm telling you what the Democrats want to do, and that is to expand Medicaid.
How much will it cost the taxpayers?
It would be roughly. It is a 9-to-1 match. So
I mean, I've heard numbers up to $400 million additional from the tax coffers every year.
I have not heard that.
Well, here's the problem with that, David. And to be honest with you. I mean, and I've said this before, if that's the numbers and you put them down there and they're solid, we've talked to everybody from the Commissioner of Insurance, Mike Cheney, to the party chairman of the committees, the lieutenant governor, the governor, the speaker of the House, and we get different numbers on here. And when you come in and say this is how it is exactly, then you must have numbers that nobody else has, because we get all of these different things of how much it's actually going to cost and what good it's actually going to do other than put another burden on the state of Mississippi.
Well, and you've had the Hospital Association in here, and if you asked any hospital anywhere in Mississippi what the...
Yeah, well, of course, if you're going to ask a hospital association.
How are you going to run a state without hospitals? How are you going to have a state without hospitals?
But I also wanted to say, and you have to agree with me on this one, is the problem with the hospitals all because they're not getting enough money from the government, or is it mismanagement? And we've had hospital people on here who will tell you, in a lot of cases, these hospitals are trying to operate as they were 40 years ago, and you can't do it in today's environmental financial climate. And they've got to change, and some of them won't change. And you got to go back and say it's management on some of these, and we haven't deleted that equation yet before pouring more money into them.
Most hospitals, most of their patients pay for their bills with government money, whether they are public employees, Medicare, or Medicaid patients. That's the payer at every hospital state. And so I would ask any member of the legislature, wherever you live in the state, to go to the hospital where your constituents go and ask the person who runs that hospital, what's the most important thing I can do to help you? Because we need a strong hospital in my community.
And that would be give me money.
It would mean cover these people with insurance, and where the federal government picks up 9% or 90%, and the state government picks up 10%.
All right, here's something that I'll get a lot of people.
And if you disagree with that, and your plan is something different to keep 40 hospitals from closing, then let's hear it. We have a plan. What's the Republican plan?
I think to go back, first of all, and do a complete audit and find out exactly, is management a problem with this? Are they trying to do some services that they don't need to do, that they can't do? And it's not like we were 40 or 50 years ago in the state. But here's what a lot of voters in the real world cannot compute. And maybe you can help us, because I know you're a very intelligent guy. Let me give you an example. If a soup kitchen is having a tough time with government reimbursements on feeding 1 million people, how is feeding 2 million going to alleviate that problem and make it all better?
Again, what we're talking about here is 300,000 people who are working in the state, who are working in jobs that don't provide health insurance. They're freelance people. They're freelance. They're waiters, waitresses. They cut grass. They own their own business. They're working, but they don't have health insurance. And so when they get sick and go to the hospital, they get a bill and they can't pay it. And the hospital has to eat it and pass on those costs to the people who do have insurance, because that's the only place they get money from. And 39 states, and North Carolina looks like they may be the 40th, have decided that this is the right thing to do. And the question is Mississippi going to be last? And if you ask the hospitals in your community, the people who live in your community, employ people in your community, what's the most important thing I can do for you? They would tell you, you need to expand Medicaid.
How many people do we have cover? Are we covering in a state of what? About 3 million people now? How many people are we covering now?
Well, you've got Medicare, which is for senior citizens.
I'm not talking about Medicare. I'm talking about Medicaid and CHIPS, and CHIPS, the CHIPS program.
Well, it is inflated right now because of it's essentially the numbers have been frozen due to COVID and have not gone back to where they have been historically. But you've got.
In other words, once they go up, it's hard for them to go back down.
But I think everybody anticipates that will happen. And in addition to that, the federal government has been paying a higher percentage of that cost. And so that gets back to the tax cut question. The state costs are going to go up because the federal match is going to go down at some point.
So if we do have around 250 to 400 million additional dollars from the state coffers, I mean, that's got to be figured in, is what you're saying.
I don't know. No one knows what the number is going to be because eligibility changes for Medicaid depending on how many people qualified. I mean, that number moves all the time. So
the other thing that and it's always griped me about this, and I know people might get tired of me hearing this, but at some point I was looking again on Wallet Hub, and Wallet Hub puts us as the worst place in the nation to raise a family. Of course, I think they just mimeograph that on there, and they have no idea what they're talking about. But we carry more than any other state. Every morning when we get up, a heavier load of poor people in this state, traditionally through 140 years of Democrat rule. And it's with us, and it's hard to get rid of it. But the problem is when we start spending literally billions upon billions upon billions, if not trillions of dollars in the Mississippi Delta as a whole, in the Mississippi River Valley, to solve the problem of poverty, we're getting nowhere. We put millions and millions of dollars from taxpayers' money, both federal and state, in solving the problems of health care in our state, and we don't do anything. We got generational health care, and it never gets better because the government program that we issue sucks. It doesn't put enough demand on the people who are getting this money from the folks who are working.
If you want to stop the existing Medicaid program and the existing Medicare program right now, which is government money, what do you think would happen to
Where the hell does government money come from? Can you tell me what tree government money comes from?
If you want to close the Medicare and Medicaid program, you tell me that, and every hospital in this state will close. Every one of them.
Nobody said that.
Well, I don't understand. You have to understand that government money keeps these programs open. That's right. They're privately run hospitals.
It's the two different thoughts of a conservative and a liberal, and the two will never be wired together. And all we're asking is that the program and the money we have from taxpayers who are out there working every single day is to use that money in the right way. And when we do a program over a 5, 10, 15, 20, 25, 30-year program, and it's not working, and we're just managing the poverty and not solving it, we ought to do something else.
The Medicaid program in this state for the last 20 years has been run by Republicans. So if there's a problem, that's who you got to call.
140 years before that for Democrats who've instilled this whole format that we have here. What else is on the top of your platter as far as education is concerned, because you're vice chair of the Education Committee?
Well, just to tone back the partisanship for a little bit, Paul, I would say that education the last few years has been a real bright spot. And I would say for a long time, education was often partisan. And I think we are focused now in the legislature, Republicans and Democrats, on doing the basic common sense things that we ought to do. Passed the largest teacher pay raise in history last year.
Yes.
Trying to do some innovative things in a bipartisan way on the Senate side with the school calendar. I'm optimistic on what we're doing for education.
Right. Hold on 1 second. Your final thoughts coming up in a moment or two. By the way, last year economically we're doing pretty good too. We saw $6 billion in new corporate capital investments into our state. $6 billion. That is a record from those evil Republicans, by the way, and almost 7 times the previous average of what was it, $900 million per year over the last 4 years. or 3 years. Absolutely remarkable. $6 billion in new corporate capital investments. That's why people are looking, as far as what you just said a moment ago, David, in education, how we're doing what we're doing in the state of Mississippi. Final thoughts with David Blount coming up next.
From that. Gallo. SuperTalk, Mississippi.
Live from the Trustmark Studios, my friends. I don't think there's ever been a time when David Blount and I got together we didn't have a spirited conversation, and I appreciate this very, very much. David, your final thoughts here as we have the final segment.
That I'd like to see this legislature do that I have heard bipartisan support for is to restore the initiative process. You remember that the Mississippi Supreme Court invalidated that after the medical marijuana measure. Right now, people do not have the right to circulate petitions and put measures on the ballot. That needs to be restored. The Speaker filed a bill on the House side. I filed a bill on the Senate side, and they're pretty similar, actually. And although we didn't talk, they're pretty similar. We need to come to an agreement on that and restore that right to the people.
What's your version of this as far as the entryway on the number of petitions?
Both of us are talking about a statutory change. My process that I proposed was essentially keeping the number the same as it has been for the past 25 years, which is 12% of the votes cast for governor in the last election. And again, I'm not in charge over there, but despite, contrary to what you may hear some people say, but that's my number was just keeping it the same. So
what is the House's?
I think that House number is the same as my number. But the Senate, I understand from the folks I talked to in the Senate last year that they would like to see that number be a little bit higher. We need to figure that out, and we need to give the people that right
For
to vote
people
back.
who don't understand what we're talking about, is you get 12% of registered voters.
12% of the votes cast for governor in the last gubernatorial election. So it changes every 4 years.
And if 12% of those people want an initiative, then it would go on the ballot.
Yes.
And the other side of this is that they wanted as high as 15 or 20%, or did we have another number out there?
One proposal I saw, and I can't speak for the leadership, but one proposal that I saw would make it 12% of the votes cast for president, and that turnout is higher than in the gubernatorial election. So that would have the effect of raising the number. And there are lots of other details that go into this besides just the number of signatures that are required. But we need to figure that out. The people need that right.
The other thing is the postpartum, and that's going to be coming up again. Have you seen any waiver or stance change a little bit as far as the House is concerned?
I'm not over there. I can't speak for that. But again, that was passed in a overwhelming bipartisan vote by the Senate to extend coverage. For the same, it doesn't expand eligibility. It's the same people, but right now, a mother who has just given birth loses health care coverage if she's on Medicaid, and this is a good program, and it works, and it helps people, and everybody understands that. And right now, she loses coverage after 2 months after giving birth. We believe that should be extended to 1 year. The governor could do that today if he wanted to, but since he hasn't, the legislature needs to act.
Quickly, what's your stance, because this is mostly in your district, as far as the Capitol Police and expanding that?
The Jackson delegation, and I'm part of that, was unanimous in its support for expanding the Capitol Police. We think they need to be involved in the community like any other police department, but the delegation as a whole has supported that. I've had meetings in different parts of my district with the Capitol Police who have always been there, and I'm hopeful that there's going to be an announcement between the Jackson Police Department, the Capitol Police Department, and the Hinds County Sheriff's Office for a plan. So I think it can work, and they've got to do like every police department anywhere else. They need to be involved in the community and the people they serve. But our delegation was asked for that last year, and we'll be asking for it again.
There is something. It was in the stack here, and I think, here it is. The director of the U.S. Marshal Service is talking about violent crime. Director Ronald Davis attended a violent crime reduction forum on Thursday of last week. Were you a part of that?
I was not. I heard about it, but it's going to take partnership. Everybody in Jackson recognizes that we have a crime problem.
Yeah.
And this is something that we got done again in a bipartisan way last year with more, not only help for the Capitol Police, but for the District Attorney's Office, more prosecutors, more defenders, more judges, and we're going to be pushing that again this year.
There was a rumor out, and I don't want to be the cause of spreading rumors, but that the mayor of the city of Jackson was not happy with his job either, or as far as somebody even said he was planning on maybe thinking about retiring or resigning. And I don't know where that came from, but have you heard anything?
I have not heard that.
I haven't either. That would be joy for some people, especially in the city of Jackson, but I think it was just a rumor. David, as always, sir, I appreciate it very, very much. The Senate gavels in at 10 o'clock this morning. The House gavels in at 2 o'clock this afternoon. We have one special election going on, and that is in the House, and I think I said District 23, and it is. So the polls close at 7.